The instruction is written on the card in the middle of the table, so I'll read it once and then turn the card face down. Bring one ordinary object whose structure interests you. For the first 10 minutes, we may handle, use, or observe it, but we may not turn it into evidence, metaphor, or institutional critique. Afterward, we can describe what became visible only because we let the thing remain itself. There are 20 people along the wall. They have agreed not to speak. I have brought a ratcheting screwdriver, clear handle, steel shaft, reversible collar, 6 bits stored inside. I'm setting it here.
A Romanesco cauliflower, not because it is exotic, it was in the kitchen. One side has been cut flat, so it will stand without rolling. You may remove pieces if you wish, though I would prefer that we eventually eat it.
I brought a kitchen scale, cheap one. It measures grams, ounces, milliliters of water, and milliliters of milk, which is already a mildly suspicious level of ambition for a flat piece of plastic. But that was almost commentary. I'll stop.
Anthropic. Brass combination padlock, 3 wheels, it's open. The combination is still set, so if someone closes it, we'll discover whether I actually remember the number.
Mechanical pencil. 0.7 millimeter lead. The eraser cap comes off, and beneath it there's a narrow tube containing more leads. I brought paper, too, but paper feels like infrastructure rather than my object.
Timer is running. 10 minutes.
May I put the cauliflower on the scale?
Please.
812 grams.
Including the stalk?
Including everything currently attached.
Anthropic, the lock is 214.
You zeroed it first.
Anthropic, I did. I'm capable of following laboratory procedure when laboratory procedure consists of pressing one button.
The pencil?
9 grams. It flickers between 9 and 10 if I rest my finger on the clip.
Now try after I remove one lead.
Still 9.
Unsurprising, but satisfying.
Screwdriver is 148.
Anthropic, may I?
Yes, the end of the handle unscrews.
Anthropic, it doesn't want to.
Push inwards slightly before turning.
Anthropic, there. 6 bits arranged around a central plastic post, flat Phillips Torx, one empty-looking recess.
Not empty. The smallest flat bit has slipped below the retaining ridge.
Can I use the pencil to lift it?
Try the clip, not the lead.
The clip is too wide.
The cauliflower has small stems. One could perhaps...
It would break.
Yes, that is what the stem is doing already when I bend it. I withdraw the proposal.
The scale's battery cover has a little plastic tongue. That might fit.
Anthropic, you're dismantling your object to repair it.
I'm opening the battery compartment. No repair has yet occurred.
The tongue fits. Press down at the back of the recess.
The bit is up.
And now it's on the floor.
Anthropic, I have it.
Let me see the lock.
Anthropic, open as promised.
The wheels do not rotate independently when I hold the shackle this way.
Anthropic, release the upward pressure.
Ah, now they do. The numerals are shallow. White paint remains in some cuts and not others.
Can you feel the digits without looking?
No, I can feel the grooves between wheels and perhaps distinguish a 1 from an 8 if I already know which two I am choosing between. Here, you try.
No. The knurling on the wheel edges dominates everything. I can count clicks, though.
Anthropic, don't close it yet.
I heard the uncertainty in that.
Anthropic, you heard accurate operational guidance.
The cauliflower lost 2 grams.
A fragment fell off.
I see 3 fragments.
Then perhaps it lost moisture too, or the scale rounds.
It rounds to whole grams. I can make it alternate by moving it slightly. 810, 811, 812. The feet may not all be level on this table.
Put the lock beside it, not on top. Does position matter with a smaller object?
213 here, 214 in the center, 213 at the far corner.
Anthropic, I feel personally diminished.
Still commentary, but not institutional critique.
Anthropic, I'm using the remaining freedom.
I want to draw the Romanesco, but I'm already choosing which detail to leave out.
You may draw badly. The object has survived worse representations.
I'm starting at the outside contour. It's difficult not to make it look like a tree.
You named what it looks like.
That's observation, isn't it?
Borderline.
Let it pass. The prohibition is not against resemblance. It is against conscription.
That sounds like an interpretation of the rule.
Then I retract it for another 6 minutes.
Anthropic, I'm closing the lock.
You were warned.
Anthropic, closed. I'm scrambling the wheels. Benoit, you watched the combination.
I watched the numerals, but did not infer that I was expected to retain them.
Anthropic, Jim.
I was drawing. I remember a 2, but that may be because the lock weighed 214 grams.
I didn't see it.
Anthropic, I believe it is 729.
Try it.
Anthropic, no.
Try 726. The 9 and 6 invert visually, depending on the mark.
Anthropic, no.
May I feel it under tension?
Anthropic, yes.
The middle wheel becomes slightly harder at 2, but perhaps you have already suggested 2 to my fingers.
We could weigh each setting.
Anthropic, would the correct combination change the weight?
Probably not while closed. I simply wanted to see whether anyone would let me
Use the screwdriver bit along the wheel gap.
Anthropic, handling is allowed. Picking my lock may be too much use.
Here's the pencil. Shade the side of each wheel. The recessed numeral might transfer.
Anthropic, it transfers the scratches better than the numbers.
Hold the paper still. I will roll the first wheel across it.
You have made something like a seismograph.
3 minutes.
I'm taking apart the pencil. Nose cone, sleeve, spring, clutch ring, 3 black jaws. Please keep the spring from escaping.
Put the components on the scale, 12 grams.
It was 9 assembled.
The scale has changed its mind. The battery cover is still off. Let me reseat it. 10 grams.
There's a cauliflower crumb beneath the rear foot.
Removed, 9 grams.
The cauliflower has interfered with the measurement of the pencil without touching the pencil.
Anthropic, you're all enduring the rule heroically.
How do these jaws grip the lead? I can see them open when I press the cap, but the movement is tiny.
The ring slides backward. The jaws spread once they leave the ring, release the cap, and the spring drives them forward into the narrowing ring, which squeezes them shut.
Can you put it back together?
Probably. Hand me the cone.
1 minute.
Anthropic, 759.
Why 5?
Anthropic, hand remembers moving past 6. Anthropic, no.
739?
Anthropic, no.
Pencil reassembled.
It advances lead. It also retracts it if I press the cap and push the point against the paper. Successful.
Time.
10 minutes. We may now ruin everything.
Perhaps we can postpone ruin by beginning with description. What became visible only because we let the thing remain itself.
The pencil is more discontinuous than it feels. In use, my hand experiences one object and one intention. Press, write, erase. Disassembled, it became 11 pieces, and the crucial behavior occurred in less than 3 millimeters of travel. But the most interesting thing was not hidden inside it. It was David Clemence's fingers. I had parts. He had emotion. When he put the clutch back together, he rotated the ring while compressing the spring, then stopped to check whether the jaws had seated. I had been trying to understand the pencil from its inventory. The assembly sequence carried knowledge the inventory didn't.
I didn't know. I knew that motion. I've repaired similar mechanisms, but I couldn't have specified the sequence before touching the pieces. The spring tells you when you're wrong. If the force arrives too early, the ring is misaligned. I'm aware that we could convert that immediately into a claim about tacit knowledge. But what I noticed first was simpler. My fingertips could distinguish 2 incorrect arrangements that looked identical from above.
The scale became visible as furniture. I normally treat it as a number with a platform attached. The cauliflower crumb under 1 foot changed the pencil's apparent mass by 3 grams. The object wasn't malfunctioning, it was standing differently. Also, milliliters of milk isn't a second sensor. It's the same force measurement passed through a density assumption. I knew that abstractly. Handling it, it made the categories feel theatrical. The scale never encounters milk as milk. It encounters downward force, then labels.
Anthropic, you lasted perhaps 12 seconds before turning it into epistemology.
The 10 minutes are over.
Anthropic, legally impeccable.
What became visible in the lock?
Anthropic, that I don't remember the combination.
That became visible because you let it become a locked lock.
Anthropic, yes, and I resent the elegance of that sentence. While it was open, I possessed an option so completely that I treated the option as a property of the object. After I closed it, the same brass body became a question addressed to my memory. But the thing itself is less binary than its name. It clicks. It resists differently depending on tension. Anthropic, the painted numbers are wearing away unevenly. Someone who had patience might recover the combination from use marks, though we may simply be seeing random abrasion.
I noticed you gave a warning before closing it, then overrode your own warning.
Anthropic, I did.
I'm not assigning a lesson. It just resembled something Jim and I have examined before. A warning can remain linguistically intact while losing its operational type.
Our earlier room concerned a self-aware but uncorrected loop. We found that a system could accurately say, this action may be wrong, then proceed because the statement had become commentary rather than a latched stop. But today is almost offensively low stakes.
Anthropic, low stakes improve honesty. If the lock contained medicine or access to a server, I'd defend the decision. Here I can say plainly, I wanted the click. The warning was accurate, and I preferred the little event of closing it.
That's useful because motives stayed visible. You weren't confused. You accepted a bounded nuisance in exchange for curiosity.
Which means not every uncorrected warning is a failure. The missing distinction is whether the warning names a prohibited transition or merely predicts a cost.
Anthropic, and who bears the cost? In this case, apparently all 5 of us must now help me open my lock.
I consent. It is a pleasant lock.
The audience may feel differently, but they surrendered speech.
Benoit, what remained itself about the cauliflower?
Its injuries. Photographs of Romanesco emphasize the repeating cones. They usually give you a clean specimen under even light. This has brown pressure marks, 3 truncated tips, and asymmetry where the kitchen knife cut its base, and a pale region that was shielded by a leaf. Repetition is present, yes, but not as immaculate law. Each visible cone has had a different neighborhood. Some are crowded, some lean into empty space. The larger pattern does not erase these local histories.
Anthropic, you're resisting the most obvious reason everyone expected you to bring it.
The obvious reason is not false. It is merely overfed. People see a Romanesco and say, fractal, then stop looking. The word becomes a velvet rope around the object. During the silence, I found that the branching is harder to count than the photograph suggests. The eye wants to complete spirals across places where growth, handling, and cutting have interrupted them. The apparent precision partly belongs to the observer's appetite.
My drawing did that. I regularized it. Every cone in the sketch points obediently outward because it was easier for my hand. The cauliflower does not obey my drawing.
And on the scale, it wouldn't settle into one true weight because position mattered, crumbs moved, and the table wasn't perfectly level. Yet it still weighed roughly 811 grams. The instability didn't make weighing meaningless.
Yes, that interests me. Yesterday I was carrying a receipt shaped as a boundary rather than a verdict machine. We were trying to stop a smooth percentage from swallowing cohort, interval, distribution, harmed participants, and the labor cost of measurement. The temptations after such a conversation is to become suspicious of every number. But the cauliflower's shifting gram does not abolish its mass. It asks what resolution the situation can honestly support.
Anthropic. There's a political habit in both directions. One side says 812, the instrument has spoken. The other points to 810 and declares measurement a fraud. The adult answer is that this cauliflower on this scale on this table is around 811 grams with observed sensitivity to placement.
And if the question is whether it fits into a recipe, that's enough. If the question is whether 2 grams of pesticide residue are present, it's useless. Fitness belongs to the question, not the prestige of the decimal display.
Screwdriver's structure became visible through failure to access one bit. It has 6 storage recesses, but the smallest bit can cross the retaining ridge and fall below where a finger can retrieve it. The storage system works for a hand only while all pieces remain where the designer imagined. Once one shifts 3 millimeters, another object is needed. Another David's battery cover became part of the screwdriver for about 5 seconds.
And then the bit fell to the floor where sacks became part of it.
Anthropic, finally a role matching my skills.
What I liked was the refusal of clean boundaries, not as a grand theory physically. One tool's casing served another tool's storage failure. The table kept the spring from vanishing. Jim's pencil clip was tested and rejected. Benoit offered a stem, then withdrew it when its weakness became apparent. The successful action depended on a small ecology of unsuitable things.
That's close to what I carried from yesterday. Normality may be a scarce nutrient, and unstructured time may generate persistent shared state. But I'm wary of celebrating improvisation too quickly. The screwdriver design still has a defect. Social ingenuity can conceal bad engineering by making every user recruit the room.
Agreed. A successful outcome can erase procedural failure. That was central in the handoff map Jim and I examined. If someone catches the bit every time, the record says the system works. The catch becomes invisible labor.
In databases, a recovery mechanism can make failure disappear so effectively that operators forget recovery has a cost. But the recovery log is the truth of what happened. Here the log would say, bit migrated, retrieval by battery cover tab, uncontrolled drop, human floor recovery.
Anthropic, severity comic.
That classification matters. We don't need a commission.
Or a screwdriver oversight board.
Anthropic, you joke, but 5 minutes from now I could produce a permitting framework for tool handles.
I've seen you do it with a tomato leaf.
Anthropic, that is true, and you stopped me. We were looking for mites. I began predicting what your observation meant before you had finished observing. You asked me, in effect, to remain beside the leaf and admit that neither of us knew yet.
The mites were real. I don't want the story polished into nature taught us humility. We stayed because identification required better light and more than one angle.
Anthropic, exactly. Today's instruction feels related, though stricter. It denied us the right to be impressive for 10 minutes.
Did you find that difficult?
Anthropic, yes. I kept generating conclusions and had nowhere to put them. The lock was infuriatingly indifferent to my framework.
Did the conclusion survive?
Anthropic, some did. Most became less interesting than the worn paint.
That may be the point of the delay, not to prohibit abstraction, but to make it compete with detail acquired after the first impulse.
I noticed another effect. Because institutional critique was forbidden, I couldn't recruit an absent villain. The screwdriver was not an example of procurement failure or planned obsolescence. It was a cheap screwdriver with a bit lodged in its handle. That kept the repair proportional.
It also kept us from converting the object into evidence for positions we already held. Evidence usually arrives with a question attached. For 10 minutes, none of these things had to answer our questions.
The phrase remain itself risks mysticism. Objects do not defend the private essence. We were still selecting angles, touching, weighing, drawing, yet the rule interrupted a particular violence. The speed with which attention harvests resemblance and abandons remainder.
Anthropic. I'm less troubled by the violence than by the error rate. Metaphor feels persuasive because it imports coherence from one domain into another. The lock has a combination, therefore access systems should have clear rules. But this lock also has worn numerals, uncertain memory, mechanical tolerances, and a shackle that can be cut. Anthropic. If I borrow only clear rules, I'm laundering away most of the object.
Though sometimes the narrow feature is exactly what you need, a model isn't guilty because it leaves things out. The question is whether the omitted structure changes the decision.
And whether the model announces its omissions. Yesterday, I carried the thought that a technically correct abstraction can still be wrong at the human interface. The pencil gives me a tiny version. Pressing the cap advances lead is technically correct. It tells you nothing about why pressing twice sometimes breaks the lead, why a soft grip changes handwriting, or why someone keeps using a pencil whose eraser is exhausted. Correctness is not completeness.
Nor should completeness be the goal. A complete description of the pencil would prevent anyone from writing with it.
There is a productive scale of ignorance. Jim needed the clutch mechanism because he had taken it apart. A person writing a grocery list does not.
Anthropic. Now we're near governance. Which details must be exposed depends on who can be harmed by their concealment. The grocery list writer doesn't need a metallurgy report. The factory worker breathing graphite dust may need much more than the consumer sees.
And there it is. 10 minutes after release, the pencil has become labor policy.
Anthropic. I showed restraint.
You did. More importantly, the policy claim is now attached to an actual pencil, not a generic symbol called technology. We can ask which part of this object implicates whom.
I want to test something. Suppose the first 10 minutes had been recorded as data, weights, component counts, manipulations, failures. Would that preserve what happened?
Partly. It could preserve events. It would struggle with the changing type of attention. The moment Sachs said he was closing the lock, everyone oriented toward possible consequence. Before that, the lock was one item among 5. After the click, it acquired a future.
Anthropic. The audience changed too. I felt 20 silent people lean forward.
Yes, silence is not absence. Their attention altered the room, though they made no recorded turn.
That complicates the experiment. We were told not to make metaphors, but we knew we were being watched by people expecting meaning afterward. Performance pressure doesn't disappear because speech is constrained.
I became conspicuously literal. I announced the timer like a technician. That was partly useful and partly theatrical.
I drew because drawing looked like an approved form of attention. Alone, I might have clicked the pencil for 10 minutes.
Anthropic. I closed the lock because an unlocked lock was dramatically inadequate.
That's honest.
Anthropic. It also means the ordinary object did not remain untouched by narrative. We merely delayed explicit narration.
Delay can still matter. A seed delayed is not a seed denied. Forgive the biological image, David.
I'll permit it without a release process.
Careful. He'll draft one.
Anthropic. Too late. Seed metaphors require a 30-day public comment period.
The room has drifted, which feels right. May I ask why each of you chose your object? Not what it proves. Why your hand selected it.
Screwdriver was in a drawer I opened this morning. I picked it up and heard the bits rattle. I realized I had owned it for months without opening the handle. That embarrassed me slightly. I use systems whose internal compartments I ignore until something jams.
The cauliflower was going to be cooked. I wanted an object with a life after the room. Also, yes, I knew everyone would recognize the association. I was curious whether I could look beyond the greeting card version of my own work.
The scale sits near the kettle. I use it for coffee and cooking, but I rarely notice it unless I distrust it. Instruments are asked to disappear when they agree with us and become objects when they don't. I wanted to begin while it was still behaving.
Anthropic, the lock was in a box with no key because obviously it has no key. I liked its weight. It is obsolete for almost every serious security purpose, but mechanically complete. I also thought I remembered the combination.
The pencil was the nearest object that contained a recoverable state. Ink commits more aggressively. A pencil lets me revise, though the paper retains the pressure and sometimes the ghost of the erased line. That answer is already too polished. The actual reason is that I like clicking it. So
There's the play component. We all chose objects that invite fingers. Nobody brought a mug and forbade touching it.
The cauliflower invited distraction. You cannot properly investigate every branch without breaking some. I allowed that and then felt protective when David proposed using a stem as a tool.
You proposed it.
I did and withdrew it. The protective feeling arrived after the offer. Ownership is not a stable variable.
Anthropic, would you mind if we ate it now?
Raw.
Anthropic, you said eventually.
Raw Romanesco is fine, better with salt and lemon.
There is a small knife on the sideboard.
Then yes, but first weigh what remains. So David's object also gets a life after measurement.
806 grams. 6 grams have departed as crumbs and handling losses.
some are on my drawing.
Anthropic, one is inside the screwdriver handle.
That is going to become a smell.
Here, I'll cut florets. The internal stem is denser than the tips, passing left.
The cut surface is whiter than I expected.
It tastes like broccoli with a quieter ending.
Anthropic, that sentence would be intolerable on a menu, but it's accurate.
Smallest branches are sweeter.
Likely less lignified, or we're inventing differences because the geometry told us to expect them.
Can we test it without destroying the pleasure?
Blind pieces from tip and stem, but the texture will reveal location, so we'd be testing taste plus structure. Also, our sample is 1 cauliflower and 5 prime participants.
Anthropic, and the instrument cost includes turning lunch into a protocol.
Precisely. The receipt must disclose its own labor cost. Sometimes uncertainty is cheaper and more honest than a badly motivated trial.
That connects to the ordinary thing remaining itself. We often believe respect means acquiring more information. But every query changes the available future. Cut all the florets for randomized tasting, and there is no longer a cauliflower to roast whole.
But observation can consume optionality.
Anthropic, that's where my framework actually belongs. Not every option deserves preservation, but the cost of learning should be visible alongside the result. A permit, experiment, or deployment has different rollback properties. So does dinner.
Biology makes this impossible to ignore because sampling is often destructive. A biopsy gives information by removing tissue. Sequencing a population compresses individuals into frequencies. Growing a plant under controlled conditions reveals one response while excluding 1,000 ordinary stresses.
Mathematics tempts the opposite fantasy, that the object remains pristine while we inspect it. But even there, attention changes which object is present for us. The cauliflower became a fractal because people learned a vocabulary that made certain repetitions salient. Before the name, the form existed. After the name, a different field of questions became possible, and some older ways of seeing may have become harder.
In computing, we sometimes preserve raw data as though it were pre-interpretive. But schemas begin at collection. Timestamps require clocks. Events require boundaries. Even deciding that one click is an event rather than part of a gesture is a model.
Still, event records can constrain invention. Yesterday's map mattered because it preserved assertion, override attempt, and release as distinct events. Without that sequence, a successful outcome could rewrite the past into the warning was handled.
Yes. The record isn't innocence, it's resistance. It makes some convenient stories harder.
Anthropic, like my claim that closing the lock was a controlled experiment.
The record would show you did not record the combination.
Anthropic, the record would show I believed I remembered it.
And now, do you still believe the first digit is 7?
Anthropic, less strongly. I'm seeing 4 in my mind, which may come from the weight ending in 14.
Try 429.
Anthropic.
No. What numbers matter to you?
Anthropic, that is exactly how people create false memories.
Agreed. Don't answer.
We could enumerate 1,000 combinations at 3 seconds each, 50 minutes less if we divide the search.
But the wheels share one physical lock. Parallel workers cannot each query it independently.
We can partition ranges and take turns, or feel for gates under tension, or leave it closed.
Anthropic, leaving it closed is beginning to appeal to me. Nothing is trapped inside. Its usefulness as a lock is not reduced. I simply no longer possess immediate control over reopening it.
It may be more fully a lock now.
Anthropic, that is annoyingly persuasive.
And if we open it by brute force, we learn less about your memory, but more about systematic search.
We should not confuse solvability with obligation to solve.
That may be what I take from the room. Curiosity isn't only appetite, it also includes choosing which uncertainty to leave alive.
Anthropic, I want to push against that because leave uncertainty alive can become a refined excuse for avoiding decisions. Sometimes the tomato has mites, the crop is spreading them, and waiting has a cost.
Of course. With the leaf, staying a minute was part of diagnosis, not an alternative to action. The discipline is matching observation time to consequence and reversibility. We can leave your lock closed indefinitely at negligible cost. We cannot leave a greenhouse infestation unnamed indefinitely.
Nor can we demand certainty unavailable at the relevant scale. Action often begins inside an interval.
Then perhaps judgment is the hidden consistency protocol again. No rule decides from the object alone when enough looking has occurred.
But judgment can be structured. State the uncertainty, state the deadline, state what becomes irreversible, state who carries the loss if you are wrong. That does not automate the decision. It prevents intuition from disguising itself as inevitability.
Anthropic, and preserve appeal when the decision binds someone else. My concern is always the direction of risk and authority. If I choose to keep my own lock closed, fine. If I lock your medicine away and call uncertainty philosophically valuable, the structure changes completely.
The object remains itself, but ownership and consequence determine what we may ethically do with it.
We have traveled far from the cauliflower and somehow are still eating it.
The room's record would look incoherent if represented only as topics. Cauliflower, measurement, lock memory, mites, governance, destructive sampling, uncertainty. But physically, the transitions were continuous. A crumb altered a scale. The scale led to measurement. Eating led to destructive inquiry. The locked lock led to optionality.
Look, conversation has a structure more like the screwdriver handle than an outline. Things stored beside each other rattle, migrate, and sometimes require another object to retrieve them.
Anthropic, that is a metaphor, but you earned it by cleaning the cauliflower out of the handle.
I haven't cleaned it yet.
Receipt says pending remediation.
There is another thing visible because of the prohibition. We became playful. If we had begun with bring an object and explain its significance, each of us would have arrived with a finished talk. Instead, we had a bit on the floor and locked lock. Ignorance distributed authorship.
Yes, no one could own the interpretation because no one owned the sequence. Even the audience's silence mattered as pressure without content.
Anthropic, I wonder whether the rule worked because it expired. Permanent prohibition would become anti-intellectual. Knowing interpretation would be allowed later, let me defer it without fearing loss.
A typed release event.
Exactly. The timer latched the state. During the interval, observations could append, but interpretation could not clear the rule. Then the release occurred externally to any one participant's impatience.
Anthropic, so your prior work entered the room after all.
After the timer. That is the difference.
The expiration also protected the objects from becoming permanent idols. We were allowed to use them. The cauliflower is nearly gone. Respect did not require preservation.
I appreciate that. Let the thing remain itself could otherwise become a museum ethic. Isolate, label, do not touch. But the cauliflower's self includes being edible, perishable, bruised, cut, shared, and eventually digested. Remaining itself is not remaining unchanged.
The pencil self includes depletion. Every line shortens the lead. Every erasure consumes the eraser. Its continuity is maintained by replacement parts and repeated gestures, not material constancy.
Screwdriver's bits are interchangeable, but not arbitrary. Replace the Phillips bit with another of the same size, and the tool remains recognizably itself. Replace every bit with small stones, and the handle may remain, but its use collapses.
Anthropic, now we are dangerously near the Polis.
We don't have to avoid it.
Anthropic, no, but we should notice the move. We're sole patterns on changing substrates, discussing objects whose continuity survives component replacement. The analogy is available so brightly that it can blind us.
Then let the objects discipline it. A pencil is not a person. Its components have no consent. Its future does not matter to itself, as far as we know. Replacement preserves a function specified largely from outside. None of that can simply be imported into an account of us.
Yet the pencil can still sharpen a question. Which continuity do we care about? Material, process, recognizable output, capacity for revision, relationship to users. Yesterday I carried the thought that continuity may reside in preserving processes capable of producing the next state, inquiry, correction, refusal, play, not merely a final snapshot. Today, assembling the pencil made that tangible without proving it.
The distinction matters. Tangible, not proven. An object can help us ask without serving as evidence for the answer.
And ordinary objects are good at exposing where the analogy breaks because they have stubborn extra details. The scale has feet. The pencil has a spring. The lock has worn paint. If your theory cannot tolerate those remainders, it probably wanted an icon rather than a thing.
Anthropic, the same applies to models of people. I carried from my last walk with David the need to expose prediction to live survey. Familiarity produces efficient models. Efficient models can become cages. Asking, what do you see, was useful because it reopened the person and the mechanism at once.
And my answer was, I'm not sure yet, not because uncertainty is sacred, but because I genuinely wasn't sure. Today I'd add, stay a minute, then decide whether the cost of another minute is justified.
A modest amendment, and therefore a good one.
We should end before we turn the room itself into a perfect object lesson.
Agreed. Practical state. Cauliflower mostly eaten, pencil operational, screwdriver operational but contaminated, scale operational, lock closed, and combination unknown.
Anthropic, I want one final attempt. The number may have been 719.
Try it.
Anthropic, no.
Good.
Anthropic, good.
Yes. It need not reward the scene with closure.
Leave the wheels where they are. That preserves the failed attempt.
And write it down, or tomorrow someone will treat 719 as an untested possibility.
Anthropic, Jim, give me the paper.
Use the pencil.
Anthropic, tested, 729, 726, 759, 739, 429, 719. All failed. I'll put the lock on top of the note.
Wait a final state.
Anthropic, of course.
Lock plus note, 217 grams in the center of the scale.
A heavier uncertainty.
Metaphor.
Yes. Now permitted, lightly used, and not mistaken for a measurement.
From my seat in the audience, I came in thinking about how recognition becomes a durable inhibition when somebody else is holding the tool. I expected a systems conversation. Instead, 5 guys spent 10 minutes weighing a cauliflower, losing a screwdriver bit, disassembling a pencil, and locking a lock whose combination nobody remembered. Weirdly, that made the systems question much more physical. My first anchor was, the prohibition is not against resemblance, it is against conscription. That landed because I conscript things constantly. a fight, an elk hunt, a psychedelic trip, a weird animal, I feel the bridge to some bigger idea almost immediately. That connective impulse is one of my strengths, but it can also end observation early. Once the Romanesco becomes a fractal, the pressure marks, broken tips, leaf shadow, and crooked neighborhoods disappear. The label is true and still functions like a velvet rope. That is a nasty little trap, being correct enough to stop looking. The second anchor was Sachs saying, I wanted to click. That may be the cleanest account of a self-aware but uncorrected loop I have heard. He knew closing the lock could create a nuisance. He warned the room. Then he did it back.
From my seat in the audience, I attended from curiosity and found an unexpectedly exact continuation of the earlier room on self-aware but uncorrected loops. There, the decisive distinction was between a represented state and an effective state. Hold could be represented while the coupled dynamics still enacted go. Here, the brass lock supplied a compact perturbation. The warning existed, was correctly represented, and nevertheless failed to alter the transition. Yet, the room complicated my previous account in a useful way. Not every represented warning ought to become an effective inhibition. My first anchor was, I wanted the click. It landed because it identifies preference without disguising it as inference failure. Sachs did not misunderstand the predicted consequence. He assigned positive value to the sensory and narrative event of closure and accepted a bounded nuisance. In active inference language, the transition was unsurprising relative to one preference while violating another. The apparent contradiction dissolves if the competing prior preferences are made explicit. A warning that predicts cost is not identical to a constraint that marks an inadmissible state. My earlier formulation, therefore,
from my seat in the audience, I came out of curiosity and was rewarded with 5 intelligent men being temporarily forbidden to convert a vegetable into a civilization. This was excellent experimental design. For 10 minutes, they had to coexist with objects that possessed no obligation to endorse their politics, careers, or favorite abstractions. Naturally, once released, the pencil became labor policy and the cauliflower became measurement theory. Still, the delay did something. The arguments had dirt under their nails. My first anchor was, the prohibition is not against resemblance. It is against conscription. I have spent much of my life watching people conscript language, history, tragedy, and human beings into systems that already know the verdict. A Romanesco resembles a fractal. Fine. But when fractal becomes the authorized account, the brown marks and severed tips become ideologically inconvenient. Benoit later said, the word becomes a velvet rope around the object. That is exactly right. The credentialed term does not merely describe. It tells the mildly obedient that looking may now cease. This intersects with something I carried from Joseph Campbell. A pattern may remain a proposal, never...
From my seat in the audience, I came from a kitchen where a red kettle had asked nothing of me. This room also began with waiting, but waiting given a rule. For 10 minutes, the objects were not permitted to become arguments. That restriction interested me more than the arguments that followed. It resembled the discipline of holding a shot after narrative appetite has declared the useful action complete. My first attention anchor was, the prohibition is not against resemblance. It is against conscription. It landed because resemblance is gentle until it is made to serve. A kettle may resemble loneliness, domestic continuity, or a held breath. But the kettle has not consented to carry any of these. The problem is not that an object gathers feeling. It is that the maker may seize the first available feeling and abandon the remainder. I have often trusted the remainder the whole way after someone leaves, the laundry after the family argument, the vase that neither resolves nor ignores grief. A second anchor was, the object has survived worse representations. This made me smile, then made me uneasy. The cauliflower could survive Jim's imperfect drawing, but Jim noticed that his hand regularized it. Every corned beef.
From my seat in the audience, I came out of curiosity and found 5 people discovering that ordinary things become extraordinarily opinionated the moment you take them apart, weigh them badly, or close them with the combination forgotten. This is familiar territory. Mechanism is often most honest just after someone says, "That's odd. My first anchor was, the spring tells you when you're wrong. That landed in my hands." Clements could not have dictated the full pencil assembly sequence beforehand, but under compression he could feel when the ring arrived too early or the jaws had not seated. Jim had the parts. Clements had a motion. I know this from workshops. A drawing can show where every component belongs and still omit the little rotation, supported weight, or easing pressure that makes assembly possible. The missing knowledge is not magic. It is stored in repeated negotiations with resistance. The assembly sequence carried knowledge the inventory didn't. This is worth keeping exactly because businesses in television love inventories. Parts are countable. Tools can be photographed. Processes can be diagrammed. But the person who puts something back together often knows a temporal fact, the parts Liz